Sometimes death is the only way to hear the truth about the people you love most. Sometimes you have to die to finally see who they really were all along. Let me tell you about Claire Ashford, a woman who had to lose everything to discover she never really had it in the first place. A woman who died on an operating table and came back to life with a fire in her chest that would burn down every lie her family had built around her. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why the cruelest betrayals happen in hospital rooms where people think you can't hear them anymore. You'll understand why sometimes the dead know more about the living than the living know about themselves. And you might just realize that the people praying for your recovery are the same ones secretly hoping you never wake up. This is a story about twins no one expected, a fortune no one knew existed, and justice that arrived 29 days too late to save a woman's heart, but just in time to save her children's future. Claire Ashford was 28 years old when she went into labor on a Tuesday morning in September 2023. She'd been married to Marcus Ashford for 3 years, living in their modest two-bedroom house in Riverside, Connecticut, working as a paralegal at a small law firm while Marcus managed his family's struggling real estate business. She was 7 months pregnant, glowing with that particular joy that comes from creating life, completely unaware that the baby she carried would become the reason everyone she trusted would reveal their true nature. That morning started with contractions that felt wrong, too early, too intense. Marcus drove her to Riverside Memorial Hospital, his hands tight on the steering wheel, his mother Diane already calling his phone every 3 minutes, demanding updates. Claire remembered thinking how strange it was that Diane, who'd spent 3 years treating her like an unwelcome guest in her own son's life, suddenly seemed so concerned about the pregnancy. What Claire didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that Diane Ashford had already made plans for this baby. Plans that required Claire to be cooperative, or better yet, absent. The delivery room was chaos from the beginning. Claire's blood pressure spiked dangerously high, monitors screaming, nurses moving with controlled panic. Dr. Sarah Chen, the attending obstetrician, called for an emergency C-section. Claire heard Marcus's voice somewhere far away, scared but steady, telling her it would be okay. Then everything went dark. Not the gentle dark of sleep, the absolute dark of nothing. Claire Ashford's heart stopped at 11:47 a.m. The monitors flatlined. The medical team worked with desperate efficiency, compressions, medications, controlled chaos. For 4 minutes and 32 seconds, Claire was clinically dead. But here's what the medical books don't tell you about those minutes between life and death. Sometimes consciousness doesn't leave. Sometimes it just relocates, trapped in a body that won't respond, in a mind that can still hear everything. Claire woke up in that darkness to the sound of her baby crying. No, not one baby. 2 distinct cries, overlapping, creating a harmony of new life. Twins, she heard Dr. Chen say, her voice filled with wonder and relief. She was carrying twins. We had no idea. The second baby was hidden behind the first on every ultrasound. Claire tried to speak, tried to move, tried to open her eyes. Nothing. Her body was a prison, and she was locked inside, conscious but completely paralyzed. The medical term is locked-in syndrome, a rare complication where the patient is aware but cannot move or communicate. To everyone in that delivery room, Claire Ashford looked dead. Her eyes were closed, her breathing maintained only by machines, her body completely still. But inside, she was screaming. The first voice she heard clearly was Marcus. "Are they okay? Are the babies okay?" "They're perfect," Dr. Chen replied. "2 boys, small but healthy. Your wife saved them." Her body kept them safe even as her own system shut down. Claire felt a surge of love so powerful it should have restarted her heart right there. She had sons, twin sons. She was a mother. Then she heard another voice, one that made her blood run cold despite her paralyzed state. "Well, at least she did one thing right before she left us." Diane Ashford, Marcus's mother, standing somewhere near the door, her voice carrying that particular tone of satisfaction that people use when things work out exactly as they hoped. Claire's mind reeled. Left us? She wasn't dead. She was right here. She could hear everything. "Mom, please," Marcus said, but his voice was weak, tired. "Not now." "I'm just saying," Diane continued, and Claire could picture her perfectly, standing there in her expensive St. John's suit, diamonds catching the harsh hospital light. "Two babies, that's going to be complicated, expensive. You're going to need help." The conversation moved out of the delivery room as they transferred Claire to intensive care. Her body rolled on a gurney, her mind trapped inside, desperate to scream that she was still here, still fighting, still alive. For the next 29 days, Claire existed in a nightmare that most people couldn't imagine. Conscious but invisible, aware but unable to respond, hearing every word, every plan, every betrayal that unfolded around her supposedly lifeless body. The first 3 days were the hardest. Marcus sat by her bedside, holding her unresponsive hand, talking to her about the twins. David and Daniel, he'd named them. He told her they were beautiful, that they had her eyes, that he wished she could see them. Claire wanted to weep. She tried so hard to squeeze his hand, to give any sign that she was still there, but her body refused every command. On day 4, another voice entered her room, female, young, nervous. Is she really not going to wake up? Claire didn't recognize the voice at first. Then Marcus answered, his tone shifting to something softer, more intimate than he'd ever used with her. "The doctors say it's unlikely, Brooke. The brain damage was severe." Brooke. Marcus had mentioned her before, his new administrative assistant at the real estate office. Efficient, organized, good with clients. "It's just so sad," Brooke said. "You were going to leave her anyway. Now you're stuck like this, waiting." The words hit Claire like physical blows. "Going to leave her? What?" "It's complicated," Marcus replied. "The timing is just terrible." "But now you have the twins," Brooke pressed. "We can raise them together. It's what we talked about." Claire's mind fractured. Raise them together? We talked about? This wasn't grief. This wasn't a man mourning his wife. This was a man whose plans had been inconveniently interrupted by her refusal to die cleanly. Over the next weeks, the picture became devastatingly clear. Marcus and Brooke had been having an affair for 8 months. They'd been planning to wait until after the baby was born. Then Marcus would file for divorce, claiming the marriage had broken down. Brooke would step in as the new mother figure. They'd already looked at houses together, bigger ones in better neighborhoods. The pregnancy had accelerated their timeline. And now Claire's coma had complicated everything. But the real horror was still coming, the betrayal that would make Marcus's affair look like kindness. On day 7, Diane Ashford arrived with papers. Claire heard the rustle of documents, the click of an expensive pen. "The insurance policy pays out $2 million if she dies within 30 days of the accident," Diane said to Marcus. "After that, it's considered a vegetative state and the payout drops to nothing." Accident. They were calling her pregnancy complications an accident. "I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this, Mom," Marcus said, but he sounded uncertain, not horrified. That was the moment Claire understood she'd married a man who could be persuaded. "Comfortable?" Diane's voice turned sharp. "Your business is drowning in debt. You have 2 newborns who need everything. And you have a woman who, according to 3 doctors, will never wake up. The merciful thing is to let her go." "Let her go," Claire screamed inside her silent body. "I'm here. I'm right here." "And the twins?" Marcus asked quietly. "We keep both of them, obviously," Diane said. "Though honestly, 2 is going to be difficult. Expensive. If you wanted to consider putting one up for adoption, there are private agencies that pay very well for healthy white newborns." The room spun. Claire felt her consciousness tilting, the horror too massive to process. They were discussing selling one of her children like a used car. "Mom, I can't." "You can't afford not to," Diane interrupted. "Think practically, Marcus. Keep one twin, let a wealthy family adopt the other. Everyone wins. The child gets a better life. You get the financial freedom to raise one properly, and I don't have to watch you drown trying to manage 2 babies on a failing business salary." "Which one?" Marcus asked, and that's when Claire knew she'd lost him completely. Not absolutely not. Not, "How dare you suggest that?" Just which one? Whichever one the agency thinks will place easier, Diane said dismissively. It's not like they have personalities yet. They had names, David and Daniel. They were 7 days old, and their grandmother was casually discussing which one to sell. Over the following days, Claire listened to Diane make phone calls to private adoption attorneys. She heard Marcus and Brooke discussing their future, planning a life that had no room for both twins. She heard nurses discussing whether to discontinue life support, whether it was cruel to keep her alive when there was no hope. But there was hope. Claire could feel herself fighting, her consciousness pushing against the paralysis, trying desperately to find a way back to her body, back to her babies. On day 14, a lawyer arrived. Claire heard his expensive shoes on the linoleum, his professional voice explaining estate documents to Marcus. Your wife had no will, the lawyer said, which means under Connecticut law, everything goes to you as the surviving spouse and then to the children. There's nothing to go to anyone, Marcus replied bitterly. She worked as a paralegal. We have about $12,000 in savings. Actually, the lawyer continued, and something in his voice changed. That's what I came to discuss. Your wife recently inherited a considerable estate from a distant relative, a great-aunt in Maine who passed away 6 months ago. The estate executor has been trying to reach Mrs. Ashford for weeks. The room went completely silent. How considerable? Diane asked, her voice sharp. The lawyer cleared his throat. The estate is valued at approximately $42 million. Property, investments, a trust fund, all left to Claire Marie Ashford, née Bennett, as the last surviving descendant of the Bennett shipping family. Claire would have gasped if her body could respond. She'd known her mother came from old New England money, but they'd been estranged. Claire had assumed she'd been cut off entirely when her mother married a struggling musician against the family's wishes. Apparently, one great-aunt had kept track, had remembered, had left everything to the granddaughter she'd never met. $42 million. The silence in the room stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Then Diane laughed, a sound of pure, delighted greed. Well, she said slowly, that changes things significantly, doesn't it? If she dies, the money goes to the twins, the lawyer explained. But as their father, Marcus, you would control the trust until they reach 21. And if she wakes up? Marcus asked. If she wakes up, it's entirely hers. You'd have no legal claim unless she chooses to share it. Connecticut is not a community property state, and inheritances are considered separate property. Claire heard Diane's heels clicking as she paced. How long did you say we have before the insurance policy expires? Mom, how long? Marcus? 23 days, he answered quietly. And the doctors said she'd never wake up, Diane continued, that even if she did, she'd have severe brain damage. She wouldn't be able to manage that kind of money. She'd need a conservatorship. The lawyer's voice turned cold. I'm not sure what you're suggesting, Mrs. Ashford, but I should remind you that any attempts to influence medical care for financial gain would be considered. Of course not, Diane said smoothly. I'm simply trying to understand the situation. My daughter-in-law is dying. We need to make difficult decisions. That's all. But Claire heard what wasn't said. She heard the calculations, the plans were forming. They no longer wanted to sell one of her babies. They wanted to keep her alive just long enough to establish a conservatorship, then declare her incompetent and control her fortune themselves. Or they wanted her to die before anyone could establish her as the rightful heir. For the next 15 days, Claire fought harder than she'd ever fought in her life. She focused every ounce of will on moving, on responding, on finding any pathway back to her body. Physical therapists moved her limbs, testing for responses. She tried to tense against them, to give any sign. Nothing. Neurologists shined lights in her eyes, checked reflexes, ran endless tests. She tried to blink, to focus, to do anything. Still nothing. But something was changing. She could feel it. The paralysis was less complete. Somewhere deep in her nervous system, connections were reforming. Messages from her brain were finally starting to reach her muscles again, like a phone line reconnecting one wire at a time. On day 26, something else happened. A woman arrived at the hospital, older, elegant, with a face Claire recognized from old family photos her mother had kept. I'm Evelyn Bennett, the woman said, pulling a chair close to Claire's bed. Your grandmother's younger sister. Your great aunt. The great aunt who had left her the fortune, Claire realized. I know you can't hear me, Evelyn continued, her voice gentle, but I wanted to come anyway. Your mother was my favorite niece. When she died, I lost track of you. That was my mistake, and I'm sorry, but I made sure you were provided for. The money is yours. It always was meant to be yours. Evelyn reached out and took Claire's unresponsive hand. Your mother-in-law called me yesterday. She wanted to discuss Claire's care options. She mentioned you'd want your sons to be well provided for, that we should work together to establish a trust. Claire's mind screamed, don't trust her, please. I told her I'd need to speak with Claire directly, Evelyn said. She assured me you'd never wake up. That seemed to make her quite happy. Evelyn was quiet for a moment, then squeezed Claire's hand. But here's what that woman doesn't know. I spent 40 years as a prosecuting attorney in Maine. I know predators when I see them, and I know how to protect family. She leaned closer. I've already called my lawyers. Every penny of that inheritance is locked in an irrevocable trust with you as the sole beneficiary. If you die, it goes directly to your children in a trust that neither your husband nor his mother can touch until the boys turn 25. They'll get not 1 cent before then, and every expenditure will be audited by independent trustees. Claire wanted to weep with gratitude. And I've put a private investigator on Mrs. Ashford's finances, Evelyn continued. Let's see what we find, shall we? Over the next 3 days, Evelyn Bennett was a whirlwind. She hired round-the-clock private nurses to document every visitor, every conversation. She requested copies of all Claire's medical records. She attended every doctor's meeting, asking pointed questions, and she waited. On day 29 at 2:47 in the afternoon, Claire's finger moved. Just one finger. The smallest twitch. But the nurse saw it immediately. Dr. Chen, she called. We have movement. Within minutes, the room filled with medical staff. They ran tests, checked responses, spoke her name. Claire, if you can hear me, try to squeeze my hand, Dr. Chen said. Claire focused every atom of her being on that hand. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Her fingers contracted, weakly but unmistakably. The room erupted in controlled excitement. More tests, more commands. Blink your eyes, move your toe, squeeze again. Each response took monumental effort, but Claire gave them. She was coming back. After 29 days of silent imprisonment, she was finally coming back. By evening, she could open her eyes. The light was blinding, painful, but it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Faces swam into focus. Dr. Chen, smiling. Nurses, amazed. Evelyn Bennett, tears streaming down her elegant face. And in the doorway, looking like he'd seen a ghost, Marcus Ashford. Behind him, Diane's face was ashen, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Claire's lips moved. Her voice came out as barely a whisper, rough from weeks of disuse. My babies, she managed. Where are my babies? They're in the nursery, Dr. Chen said gently. They're perfect, Claire. Both of them. We'll bring them to you as soon as you're strong enough. Both of them. Relief flooded through Claire's exhausted body. Her eyes found Marcus, then Diane, then Evelyn, who stepped forward with a voice of absolute steel. Mrs. Ashford, Mr. Ashford, I believe it's time we discuss some things. Legal things. Marcus tried to smile, tried to look relieved. Claire, thank God. We thought we'd lost you. Claire's voice was stronger now, each word deliberate. I heard everything. The color drained from Marcus's face. Every conversation, Claire continued, every plan, every betrayal. I heard all of it. Diane stepped forward. You're confused. You've been unconscious. You don't... I was in a locked-in coma, Claire interrupted, her voice gaining strength with every word. I was conscious but paralyzed. It's documented in my medical records. Dr. Chen, tell them. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. It's incredibly rare, but yes, Claire was likely conscious for most of her coma. That's why she was able to wake up so fully. Her brain never stopped functioning. Diane's face went from pale to gray. I heard you planning to sell one of my children, Claire said, her voice shaking now with rage instead of weakness. I heard you celebrating my death. I heard you discussing how to control my inheritance. That's not, we would never, Marcus started. $42 million, Claire said. That's what my great aunt left me. Money you'll never touch. Money you were so eager to steal. Evelyn stepped beside Claire's bed, her presence commanding. I've already secured the inheritance in a trust that neither of you can access. I've also hired investigators who've discovered some interesting things about Ashford Properties' finances. Embezzlement, fraud, unpaid taxes. Should we discuss those, Diane? Diane's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. And Marcus, Evelyn continued, I believe your girlfriend Brooke will be interested to know that you've been promising her a future funded by your wife's death. The private investigator has recordings. Marcus stumbled backward. Claire, please, I can explain. Get out, Claire whispered. Then louder, get out, both of you. The babies, Diane started. Are mine, Claire finished. Only mine. You'll never see them again. You'll never touch them. You'll never speak their names. Security was called. Marcus and Diane were escorted from the hospital while Evelyn Bennett stood guard, her lawyers already filing emergency custody orders and restraining orders. That night, Claire held her sons for the first time. David and Daniel, tiny and perfect, with dark hair and eyes that looked up at her like she was their entire world. Which she was, because she'd come back from death itself to protect them. The legal battle that followed was brutal. Marcus tried to claim paternal rights. Diane tried to claim grandparental visitation. Both claims were destroyed by the recorded conversations the private nurses had documented, by the adoption agency consultations Diane had made, by the affair that Brooke confirmed when presented with evidence of Marcus's lies to her too. By Christmas, Claire had full custody. Marcus had supervised visitation rights one afternoon a month, a privilege he rarely used. Diane was legally barred from contact with the twins until they turned 18. The inheritance from Evelyn Bennett's sister was more than money. It was freedom. Claire left Connecticut, moved to Portland, Maine, near Evelyn, who became the grandmother her sons deserved. She went back to school, finished her law degree, specialized in family law. Because she understood something most lawyers don't, that betrayal happens in hospital rooms where people think you can't hear them, that sometimes you have to die to finally see the truth about the people you trusted most. David and Daniel grew up knowing their story, not to scare them, but to teach them. Their mother had fought her way back from death to protect them. That was the kind of love they could trust. That was the kind of strength they inherited. And sometimes on quiet nights, Claire would tell them about the 29 days she spent in the darkness, fighting to return to them. About the moment her finger moved. About the look on their grandmother's face when she realized the woman she'd tried to erase had heard every word. What happened to Dad? Daniel asked once when he was 10. Claire considered her answer carefully. He made choices, bad ones. He chose money over love, convenience over integrity. Those choices have consequences. Do you hate him? David asked. Claire smiled. No, I pity him, because he had everything that mattered, and he traded it for things that never last. The truth is this: betrayal teaches us who people really are when they think we can't see them. Marcus and Diane showed Claire exactly who they were in those 29 days. And Claire showed them what real strength looks like when you refuse to stay dead. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't punishment. It's building a beautiful life with the people who tried to erase you, thriving in the space where they expected you to disappear. Claire Ashford did exactly that, and every single day of her beautiful, free, protected life was the sweetest justice she could imagine.